Well, yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, declared that Labour's Brexit policy was entering a new phase, no longer just calling for a general election, but looking at other alternatives, and he's with me now. Morning. Good morning. Can we be clear, in this new phase, do you stop relentlessly trying to have votes of confidence and calling for another election? This is really a new opening.
Yeah, Andrew, let me just take you through our party conference. We discussed what might happen, what decisions we'd have to make, and the order we thought they'd come up in. And we said there were really three phases.
One election.
No. The first phase was to assess the deal and vote on it. Obviously, that phase passed on Tuesday when the government was defeated. The second phase was to call for a general election, and we put down a no confidence vote on Wednesday. Now, the call for a general election doesn't go away, but what we anticipated was that the next phase would have to be, if the deal doesn't go through and there's no general election, then all options need to remain on the table, including the option of a public vote. So that was the unanimous position of the Labour Party. What I was saying yesterday is we've arrived at phase three, and therefore we need to be realistic about what the options are. And one of the things I was trying to do yesterday was say, let's put on one side options that are wrong in principle or never going to get through the House of Commons, and reduce it to the options that are at least capable of getting a majority, and that is a close economic relationship and a public vote. And so that was the point of the exercise yesterday.
So given where we are now, and given the way the Prime Minister has been treating the last few days, do you think we are much closer now to another referendum?
Well, the options, as I say, are now down in effect to two. I think the Prime Minister's deal obviously was rejected hugely on Tuesday. Historic vote, as you know. It was rejected the day before by the House of Lords. It's been rejected by the Scottish Parliament and by the Welsh Assembly. So that just isn't going anywhere. And the focus, therefore, in the whatever it is, 5 days since Tuesday, is the Prime Minister, in those circumstances, prepared to change her red lines and move to a different place.
So
now,
if
she won't, then it's very difficult to see where we go from here. And that's why at conference we said to break the impasse, if we get to an impasse, that's why you need the option of a public vote. So actually we anticipated this quite well as a party.
At that same conference, I remember Jeremy Corbyn saying he was opening out to the Prime Minister. She had to give guarantees on workers' rights and environmental regulations and also go towards a customs union. Can I ask you, first of all, if she did go towards a customs union, it looks very unlikely, but if she did, do you think that would be accepted by the Labour Party?
Well, we've been arguing for a long time for a permanent customs union with the EU. That is the offer that Jeremy made, not on its own, but it's a really important issue. It was made.
Anna Soubry just said just now, Labour will never accept any version of a Tory Brexit, so the whole thing is a fraud.
Well, I heard what she said. I have said for 2 years that we will faithfully look at any deal that's brought back, which is what we did on Tuesday. But I will say this, because I think it's really important, that the Prime Minister's got a real problem with her own party, because if she proceeds with a broken party on her side, well, it's more because it's not just a big night like Tuesday when a deal may or may not get through. If a deal does get through, there needs to be immediate legislation to implement it, and if her own party isn't behind the deal, it is really difficult for her to proceed. So she's said to be resilient, but we need to be clear about her liability for this. She has doggedly stuck to red lines, which from the start it was obvious wouldn't work. But now, even on Tuesday, she stood up and said, I am genuinely now open to looking at other options. That would have been one thing, but she hasn't done that. So she is the block.
Let's come to that in a second. You mentioned just now there's an awful lot of legislation that needs to get through before we leave at the end of March. There's also lots of trade deals, and the general sense the country isn't ready for it. Do you have called? You said you're not going to have direct talks with the Prime Minister as a party leadership until she has ruled out no deal.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
how does she rule out no deal?
She has proceeded for 2 years saying it's my deal or no deal. Well,
so how does she rule out no deal?
I have said for months that's a hoax, and the proof of that was 740.
Well, that's not my point. My question is, how does she take no deal off the table? How does she do it?
Well, she has to say all at this stage. She really needs to do is to say, I am not going to go on anymore with this mantra that you back my deal or no deal. I'm going to have an open discussion, and I'm absolutely not going to take us out without a deal. But if she even moved into that space,
just has to say
she moved into that space, my red lines are gone, I'm not going to, as it were, hold a gun to your heads about no deal. I'm going to be reasonable about it. That would shift the position incredibly. That would be, in effect, to rule out no deal. But no deal on the 29th of March
is going to happen anyway.
Well,
it's law, unless something changes. Unless something changes.
Let's just be honest about this. The 29th of March is 68 days away. We are absolutely not prepared for it. It'd be catastrophic. And just to take the smallest example, if we go out without a deal on 29th of March, we need customs arrangements in place at 1 second past midnight on the 30th. We haven't got any legislation setting out the tariffs. We haven't got any IT to actually identify what's going across the border. We haven't got any staff. It is ridiculous to suggest that it can be done in 68 days.
I think people who've been watching this programme attentively kind of understand that we're not ready. My question is, do you think she should revoke Article 50? She could do it with a single signature right now.
She doesn't have to revoke Article 50. She needs to be clear that she's going to give up on this idea of no deal. It's simply not viable. It's not even
Before
a
we move
threat
on to that,
because
do you think
it's
she
not
should delay Article 50?
Well, she may have to delay Article 50.
Do you want to see Article 50 delayed?
I do not want to see us leave without a deal, and if that means extending Article 50, then I'm open to extending Article 50.
But given what you've said, the 68 days and the lack of legislation, I'm asking you, as Keir Starmer, sitting here today, do you think Article 50 should be delayed?
I think it's extremely difficult to see how the Prime Minister can achieve what needs to be achieved in 68 days, and therefore I think it's inevitable that Article 50 will have to be extended, whatever decision.
And you think it should be?
Well, I think it's going to have to be, Andrew.
But you think it should be? You yourself, as Keir Starmer, say we should delay Article 50, yes or no?
I think it's inevitable. I don't think we can get what needs to be done in the next 68 days, and the blame for that lies with the Prime Minister. It was obvious. By delaying that vote, from the 11th of December to last Tuesday, she lost 5.5 weeks and didn't even come back with any changes.
Okay. We, at least, have taken Article 50 off the table, even if nobody else has. In this new circumstance, you've got your two options. The first one is your idea of a customs union and so on.
Yes.
Can I ask you, if you get into the room, if Jeremy Corbyn gets into the room with Theresa May, on what do you compromise? Do you stick absolutely rigidly to your 6 tests and every aspect, jot, tittle and syllable of those, or do you compromise?
Well, we need to have a discussion. We need to look at what is most important. I think the permanent customs union and close single market deal is important, not just because of the economy, but because I honestly don't think it's possible to have no hard border in Northern Ireland without that package. So it's very difficult to see how you compromise on those essential pillars. I mean, there's a discussion to be had. If anybody is capable of persuading me that you can have no hard border in Northern Ireland without them, I'll listen to them. But I've been listening for 2 years. I've been in Northern Ireland, talked to lots of people about that, and nobody has persuaded me so far. But there's discussion
to be had.
Do you
go into that meeting with Theresa May and her minister and say, among the other things that we want the exact same benefits of being a member of the EU once we're outside? Because that, you're grown up, that's nonsense.
Well, Andrew, I mean, as you know, those tests, those words came from the government themselves. But let's put that one on.
Them endlessly yourself.
Let's put them on one side. If your challenge to me today was this deal from the Prime Minister is so close to your test, you're just quibbling about the edges.
That's not my
challenge. Would be a very powerful challenge. This deal is far away from the test. I mean, one of the tests, of course, is does it deliver for the regions and nations of the United Kingdom? Well, as I say, Welsh Assembly, Scottish Parliament, and our Parliament voted it down, so it doesn't meet that test. But you've told
me all the things that it doesn't meet. You see, a lot of people watching may think the Labour leadership's real position is to, under all circumstances, reject whatever the Prime Minister says, blame the Tories for Brexit and hope nobody notices.
Andrew, I voted Remain. I campaigned to Remain. My constituency has strongly Remained.
Okay,
but
so
I like many. Just let me
do
finish
you
this.
Compromise?
I, like many Labour MPs, voted for Article 50. It was a very difficult thing to do, but I voted for it in good faith, to allow the Article 50 window to open and allow the negotiations to take place to see what deal would come back. At the beginning, I made it clear what sort of deal we would support. The Prime Minister has ignored Parliament throughout the process. And her problem, in many respects, is this. She didn't want Parliament to have a vote on the triggering of Article 50. The Supreme Court got us that. She didn't want... What happened last Tuesday would not have happened if the Prime Minister hadn't been forced into it by a meaningful vote. We'd have just had a statement from her.
This is great commentary, but I'm trying to nail you down a little bit on where you would compromise and where you would move. Can you honestly sit here as grown up who understands these things and say that we can leave the EU and have the exact same benefits as if we were a member? Can you really say that?
Well, as I say, that came from the government.
Yeah, you've quoted it again and again.
But it depends. I mean, strip it away from the single market and the customs union. Customs union, absolutely. because if you replicate the customs union through a customs union, then you get the same benefit. With a single market, it depends how close you are, but you can certainly get very close depending on the compromises that you need.
What about
to
your
make.
voice in Brussels? What about your MEPs?
I agree, but
so it's not exact the same benefits because you haven't got the voice there, you haven't got the votes there.
Well,
it's not the same.
If your challenge to me today was, here's the deal, it's so close to your test, and you're quibbling about whether it's precisely the same, that'd be a very good challenge, and I'd have to meet it. But we're not in that place.
Okay, well, we'll meet it then. I mean, because you are going into those meetings if they take place at all. We don't even know if they'll take place with the Prime Minister, with a series of demands. One of which is that you must negotiate the exact same benefits as being an EU member. I'm just putting it to you that is a nonsense demand.
Andrew, we're not at that place at the moment. All we're saying to the Prime Minister at the moment, saying is, to make progress, to have meaningful discussions, you need to drop your red lines and be willing to do so. Then there's a discussion to be had. There is a block, there's a roadblock, and that roadblock is the Prime Minister. And you heard from Hilary Benn, who's been in to see the Prime Minister, that her mind is closed.
Does your deal require a backstop or not?
I think at this stage, any deal probably does require a backstop, and we've got to recognise that. There are problems.
McDonnell said it didn't.
There are problems with this backstop. There are risks with it that are real, but I think because we're at this stage of the exercise, nearly 2 years in, the chances now of a deal that doesn't have a backstop are very, very slim, and we have to accept that and proceed from there.
So we've talked through quite a lot of your option one, which is a deal around the customs union, and your kind of thinking, and you've made it pretty clear that you don't think that's going to happen because the Prime Minister's not going to move, and maybe your side is not going to move enough towards
we'll see what she says tomorrow, but
it's most.
So far,
we can agree it's most unlikely. Does that therefore mean that leaves only on the table another referendum as the next option?
Well, I think she's created that circumstance because if she can't move her red line, she knows. She knows the verdict on her red line. She got that verdict loud and clear last Tuesday. She doesn't budge from that. We are at a position where we're facing a possible no deal, and therefore a public vote. That was the whole reason we moved our conference policy onto a public vote, was to deal with that situation.
And so we're now in the position where, as we've said, the customs agreement across parties is most unlikely. It's another referendum or no vote, or a no-deal exit are the two possibilities left. Therefore, in those circumstances, it follows logically that you think that a second referendum is now very likely.
Well, the next week or two is when other options are going to be tested one way or the other. Either, if the Prime Minister won't move her red lines, you can see what's going to happen, which is Parliament is going to try and take control of the process. That is because people are frustrated with the Prime Minister. This is only happening because of that. And I think in the next week or two, other options will now be tested one way or another, and they need to be, because Parliament needs to be brought in.
And if the country gets another referendum and it's in or out, which way will you be campaigning?
I will campaign for in, and I will vote for in.
And if there's a general election, your party's manifesto is going to be pro-Brexit, so you're going to be on the other side.
Andrew, you asked Jeremy Corbyn about this a number of times last week, and as he said, our manifesto will build on the last manifesto, but also take account of the conference policy and then go through a process. And that is how we'll arrive at a decision as to what's in our manifesto.
Is it conceivable that Labour at the next election won't be pro-Brexit?
Well, we need to, as I say, build on the manifesto.
Just yes or no. Is it conceivable you'll be pro-Brexit?
Take on board what we said at our conference. Of course, there's then our members who have to be brought into the process through what we call the Clause 5 meeting, and we will go through that process.
But as things stand, you're going to go into that election as a pro-Brexit party.
Andrew, you're putting that to me, and I'm not agreeing with you. I am saying the process that we go through.
You might not be.
I'm describing the process we will go through.
All right, so Keir Starmer, as ever, very nice to talk to you.